You're listening to Fusion Patrol, a listener-supported podcast. Each week, we take a single episode of a science fiction TV series, movie, or audio and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Ben.
And tonight on World Beyond Movie Night, we're going to be looking at the 1961 Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, starring Walter Pidgeon and Joan Fontaine. Let's start with a movie synopsis. The USOS Seaview, the world's most advanced nuclear submarine designed by Admiral Nelson, begins a shakedown cruise under the Arctic ice. Aboard are Captain Lee Crane, Commodore Emery, and VIPs, including Dr. Hiller, a psychologist studying the effects of confinement. The mission is interrupted when the Seaview surfaces to discover the sky on fire. The Van Allen belt is burning, threatening all life on Earth. Nelson rushes to the UN to propose extinguishing the fire with a nuclear missile, but his plan is rejected in favor of a rival scientist who believes the fire will burn out naturally. Nelson, convinced the rival's plan is fatal, defies orders and flees with the Seaview to reach the firing point in the Marianas Islands. The race against time is plagued by obstacles, including radio silence and a religious fanatic survivor named Alvarez, who believes the apocalypse is God's will. Captain Crane grows increasingly concerned about Nelson's erratic behavior and controversial decisions, such as refusing to search for other survivors. Tensions rise as the crew, cut off from news of their families, edges towards mutiny. Dr. Hiller confides to Crane that Nelson is showing signs of a mental breakdown. Desperate to contact the president, Nelson orders a risky tap on an undersea cable, which results in a giant squid attack. Later, the sub gets trapped in a minefield, resulting in the loss of a mini-sub crew. Sabotage plagues the ship, including a generator failure and a fire in Nelson's cabin. Hiller suggests the attempt on Nelson's life was created by Nelson himself. Upon finding a derelict ship, Nelson allows mutinous crew members to leave, though Hiller and Alvarez remain. As they reach the target coordinate, Crane relieves Nelson of command, fearing his instability. However, a hostile submarine attacks, forcing them to dive deep to survive. The true saboteur is revealed to be Dr. Hiller, who is fatally irradiated and falls into the shark tank. Realizing he was manipulated, Crane prepares to launch the missile, but Alvarez threatens the crew with a grenade. Crane manages to exit the sub and manually fire the missile. The explosion extinguishes the Van Allen belt, vindicating Nelson and saving the Earth. The end. All right, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Have you seen the movie before?
Yeah. So this is my third time. The first time I saw it was a long time ago. You know, like maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And then
how was it?
What? I was going to say then Keith and I, we purchased a DVD of it and watched it about 10 years ago. And then of course I watched it again last night.
Yay. How does it relate to your familiarity with it as a TV series? Which did you come first to?
The series.
The series. See, me too. And I remember the first time I saw this film, and I was very excited, and it has been a lot of years since I saw this film. I remember the opening shot, the Seaview blasting out of the water, which is awesome. That is an awesome opening. I mean, obviously, the shark tank would have been sloshed throughout the rest of the ship, but it's an awesome shot of it blasting through. And, I remember watching it the first time, and the first thing I thought was, wow, that's a cool shot. Then my second shot is, oh, damn, it's the first season front of the Seaview. And then they cut inside, and I'm like, who are these people?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where's the real Admiral Nelson? Where's the real Captain Crane? Who are these poser imposters? So even though, Walter Pidgeon and then the rest of the crew are kind of almost an all-star cast there.
Pretty much. And you got Peter Lorre in there.
Yeah, we got to come back to talking about Peter Lorre in a little bit, but it's like I watched this cast and I'm like, yeah, not as good. They're not as good as the real crew. But what you think of the movie in general?
I couldn't help but look at this film through present day eyes.
Yeah.
I couldn't help it. And they're okay. In a nutshell, I think the science is pretty weak, but doing some research, I discovered that it was not meant to be high science fiction. It never was.
No. It's Irwin
It was.
Allen.
I know. I know exactly. It was meant to entertain the masses, which it did because it generated a series, and from what I read, it was Irwin Allen's longest running series.
Yes, it was.
So the movie, it served its purpose.
And it was very popular. The series.
Oh, I could see it being very popular for its day.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, it's very dated.
Let's take a little time travel trivia then. Okay. So, because my whole life and your whole life, you have lived in the age of nuclear submarines.
Yes.
Okay. Non-nuclear submarines in 1961 could maybe go underwater for 72 hours at low speed, conserving power.
Right.
And at high speed, maybe an hour, because they had to run on batteries.
Mm-hmm.
When they're underwater, they're running on batteries, and they can't run the diesel generators or the generators unless they come to the surface. And recharge the batteries. And this is true going way back into World War II. There is a very limited amount of time that you could be underwater. So the nuclear submarine, which was purported to be or thought to be and has proven to be basically can stay underwater indefinitely, was completely new idea. The Nautilus was the first nuclear submarine in 1955. So just 6 years before this film came out. 1958 was Operation Sunshine, which was the first submerged transit of the North Pole, which coincidentally took 96 hours. So the Seaview is basically following in the steps of something that was very, very fresh in the mind of people. Furthermore, 1959 was the first submarine, the Skate, to surface at the North Pole. And 1960 was the first, and this is the Triton, the first submarine to circumnavigate the world submerged. Now, a nuclear submarine can technically stay underwater forever, but as long as there's nuclear fuel. But the crew needs food. So 60 to 90 days is typically how long they stay submerged in a submarine. So looking at 1961, all this is totally new. The idea that a submarine could do all this is real, but kind of like, the next fantasy step up from it. Whereas we look at it and we're like, yeah, okay, yeah. It's like, yeah, sub, got it. Got the whole thing.
Well, it's like early on in the episode when Nelson is, I think from now on, I'm going to call him Melson for the rest of this episode.
Listeners won't get that because I screwed up in the synopsis and called him Melson, but I've cut that out by now. So
I know, but I just brought it back.
Yeah, you did.
Because I really wanted to emphasize the mavity of the situation. Oh, yes, I went there. I went there.
Oh, right to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, seriously. When Nelson is taking the dignitaries around and he takes them to the command center, he's showing all the features. And now I've never really been in an operating submarine before, so I really don't know how the scientific accuracy of any of that is. But from purely civilian point of view, it felt like everything was pretty standard. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's that. And he was basically describing this does this does this, this does this. And I suppose for someone who, never served in the Navy back in 1961, they probably took a look at that and thought, ooh, that's interesting.
And hasn't watched a million submarine movies, modern submarine movies. They would have seen like Das Boot and things like that. But, well, I don't know when that came out. But, German U-boat submarine warfare stuff was the grist of the day for people who knew anything about submarines. So all this nuclear sub stuff is new. And so they are definitely giving a primer to everyone about it. And I gotta say, I felt like in particular, the scene where Nelson is saying to the congressman, he's saying, well, the green light, the Christmas tree here, when we dive, all the lights have to be green or we die, right? Or however, I forgot how he phrased it. But I'm like, well, if that isn't a Chekhov's gun, I don't know what is.
I
And
know.
it wasn't.
It never was. I mean, at one point, we see them, they're trying to get ready to do, I think, was a crash dive.
And the lights are switching over.
And the lights are switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it finally does. And I'm sitting there waiting for all of a sudden one of the lights to switch from green back to red. And it never happens. And I thought,
nope.
Okay, so there's the gun. Now it's not even smoking. It's just kind of lying there cold.
Yep. Never used it all in the film.
Never used it.
And, the radar and the sonar, yes, they're used because when the power takes them out, then we've already been established that that's how the sub navigates. Crane has taken them down into the weapons room, and he shows them that they have the manual firing device. Although I have to admit, when he explained it in the torpedo room, I didn't understand what he meant.
Neither did I.
I didn't realize that he was talking about, we just slap that on an ICBM and it'll shoot without us having. I thought he was talking about torpedoes or something, right?
I had actually, I'll be honest. I thought he was referring to the sub itself.
Oh, okay.
And
it wasn't very clear.
No, it wasn't. And I thought, okay, that's kind of strange. All right, but I'll go with it for now.
And then he also shows the grenade. So, I mean, the scene where they're giving the tour of the ship, actually, there's the shark tank, and there's
a number of smoking guns in that.
Yeah, and all of them do come back. Most of them do come back later in the episode. It's just
the one that you think will be like the most critical because it's one of the earliest that they show, and the seriousness. I mean, even though Nelson is saying, sort of lightheartedly, but at the same time, he says, and what if they're not all green? We run, we run away. It's whatever phrases he used. But basically, yeah, we all die. I kind of got the feeling that was going to be like the biggest of the smoking guns, and instead it turned out to be almost the biggest of the red herrings.
Yeah, it was just there to introduce us to the idea of preparing to dive. Anyway. By the way, here's another piece of trivia. I'm going to jump my notes just to say it, since we've mentioned the shark tank. Did you recognize, and I'm not joking, did you recognize the shark?
In the shark tank?
Yep. I forgot what his name was, Barney or something.
What, you mean Bruce?
Bruce, that was it. I don't know. Was it Bruce? It was something, whatever the name was.
He was always referred to as Bruce. Yeah.
You didn't recognize him, huh? He's a famous shark.
Jaws.
Nope. That is the shark that was clinging on Batman's leg.
Oh my God.
In the Batman movie.
Well, there's a reason why I didn't recognize it, because I'm trying desperately to forget that movie.
Gets out his little bat shark repellent and sprays him off. And yep, that is the same shark.
Nope, didn't recognize it.
All right, let's see. I also, I'm just going to point out that I kind of really didn't notice it until we got way through the film. And again, I've watched a lot of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and I have mixed feelings about the series.
Okay, me too.
In a way, I love it. I just absolutely, for whatever reason, and I'm not an ocean person. Not once in my life have I ever said, I'd like to go scuba diving. Nope. No desire whatsoever to do that. Snorkeling? Nope. No desire. I get it. My wife, we go to island, Hawaii, we go here, there, whatever. And it's like, oh, you can go snorkeling. I said, nope, not doing it. Just don't. It's not fear of sharks or anything like that. I just have no desire to swim further than, waist high in water. I'm just,
Oh, I get you. I mean, I've done it. I've gone snorkeling 3 times.
well, you take cruises all the time. I would assume that you get out
true.
days and you got nothing to do except snorkel and drink Mai Tais. And
I'd rather drink the Mai Tai, to be honest, but I've done the snorkeling 3 times because I just wanted to prove to other people that that I could do it. But at the same time, yeah, I have zero desire to ever do that again, and I doubt I ever will do it again.
So I'm not fascinated with the sea. I'm fascinated with space.
Yeah.
So, you can see Star Trek. I love it because, but Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is not really necessarily a good fit for me. I just love the Seaview so much.
Seaview is an awesome looking sub.
That is just like the coolest. And I'm going to say I had the model of the Seaview when I was a kid, and I hated that model because it was the first season movie Seaview with the double row of windows. It just does not look as good as the second season. See, when in the second season of the show, they added the flying sub. They redid the bow. I think it's a little wider, but it's, only got one row of windows. It looks so much better. And of course, the only model kit was the movie version. It's like, I mean, it's cool, but it's not as cool. I've gotten used to it over the years, but that was one of the most disappointing model kits I ever had because of that. It's like, yeah, that's the wrong one. Anyway, so I've always liked the idea. I kind of like the crew of the Seaview. It's one of those things. And then, it gets as weird as Lost in Space at times. Oh, this week it's a seaweed monster. Oh, this week it's mind
I was
control.
thinking of the seaweed monster just now. I hated that.
This week it's the giant whale.
Yeah. I mean, it almost felt like Lost in Space under the water.
Yeah, and it was before Lost. But, I was, because I have been watching them lately, and I like going through it, and I'm like, oh yeah, so then there's also the ghosts. There's also the Island of Dinosaurs. There's also the time that Nelson was turned into a werewolf.
Oh my God.
Twice by a radiated rabies virus. And yeah, it's there is some and mind control. I think every time I put on an episode of the show, I say to myself, let's see, what was it? Was there mind control last week of a crew member? No, I don't think so. Then this week it will be mind control of a crew member. It'll be Crane. It'll be Nelson. It'll be Crane. It'll be Nelson. It'll be Sharky. It'll be Crane. It'll be Nelson. It's just right up and then everyone on the sub will be like, I don't know, Captain Crane's acting kind of weird, but he is the captain.
Yeah, so you should follow his orders.
That whole chain of military command thing, which is actually in evidence in this movie, but not mind control. It's just like, I don't know about it. Well, what he's thinking.
I just think you're crazy.
Yeah, I think you might be cracking up there a little bit. Let's see. It's flagged as the USOS. That's the United States Oceanographic Society. Does not exist. But for this fictional world, it does. I think I don't know if they call it that in the series, but it's out of the NIMR, the Nelson Institute of Marine Research. Because Nelson's, he's a big time genius. But, okay, I know where I was going though. But what I got out of this watching it this time, and I don't think I've ever gotten this out of it before, whether it's the movie or the series. This is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Thank you very much.
This is a modern 20,000
Nelson
Leagues.
Is clearly, I was thinking the same thing. Nelson is clearly Captain Nemo.
Yeah, the driven, brilliant genius who builds his own sub. But it's also, Voyage 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which it has been a long time since I've read the actual book.
Hellish dishwasher. dishwater.
Oh, I don't remember, but
I hate the book.
it
It's
is
just it's a
basically
journal.
it's a series of underwater skits,
That's all it is
right?
in the book.
Right.
Yep.
Well, that's and you can understand why Verne would do that. It's like look at here are a bunch of fascinating scenarios I thought up of what could happen if we could be under the sea. And, we could go, we could dig up treasure, we could mine kelp, we could fight octopus, this, and this. And so as a journey, it's sort of a tour. And so I get that. But they are actually doing that in this episode, in this movie as well. And I just really never put the two together. I mean, yeah, the parallels between Nelson and Nemo. Yes, the driven genius with his fantastic submarine. There's people on board who don't belong there.
Mhm.
They are taking a very long voyage, and they are passing through these scenarios, the stopping for the cable, the stopping for the freighter, the attack by another submarine. It is going under the polar ice cap. It is kind of a modern retelling of the story with different motivations of the characters. So that's really the big difference. Nemo has his agenda to take down capitalism, and that isn't here. Nelson's at it to save the world.
Right.
So I think that's why I missed it, because usually, if somebody's ripping off Romeo and Juliet or something, oh, it's because they're in love, and they're, it does follow the same story. This does not, but it's
Well,
definitely
if you're looking for a common theme, I would say in the case of Nelson, he was going against the establishment because
that.
he was on this crusade to save the earth, even though the majority of the people running the show said no.
Yeah, let's talk about those people. Now, Nelson's a genius. Nelson's been ordered to go to he's an acknowledged genius. This is not like Nelson is like some interloper. It's like, I've got this idea. It's like, no, he's been invited to this conference because he is one of the greatest minds that we have. And he shows up and he says, I've been working on this for the last couple of days. Here's all my paperwork. We're going to nuke the thing. And they're all like, this is madness. You're going to destroy the world. And blah, blah, blah. Nobody looked at his paperwork at all.
Zuko just
Tossed it aside. Zuko, yeah.
Zuko, he just tossed it aside. He looked at it and he even scoffed at it by saying numbers or something like that. And he just tossed it aside without even giving it a benefit of a doubt.
So the fact that I'm kind of with Nelson on this one. I mean, in this particular case,
I'm too.
I brought my stuff to you guys, and now, yes, there is the ego of, I know I'm right, but he was not given a fair hearing on this. And if he is right, which turns out he is right, I love the fact that they managed to make it clear that he was right in the end, because
that's true.
The temperature hits 173 before the projected time frame, and it doesn't burn out.
It doesn't burn out.
So, yeah, which, is just kind of double. Yeah, well, Zuko was wrong.
Although they did, let's see, Nelson did have one tiny little error in his, I don't know if it was Zuko or if it was Nelson, but Nelson said that to extinguish the fire in the Van Allen belt, they had to be at a certain place on August 29th. And I can't remember, maybe it was Zuko. He said that the extinguishing would happen. Yeah, he was the one who said that the temperature would reach 173 degrees the day after. So his math is off all over the place.
Right. Yes. Zuko says that when it hits 173 in 17 days time, I think that's the number.
Yeah, because
Nelson says that 16 days he's got to launch the missile. Zuko says in 17 days it will hit 173 and the world will be saved. And Nelson says that in 18 days it'll hit 175 and we'll all die.
That's the extinguishing of the human race, right?
That's the extinguishing of the human race. So Nelson's like, I can't wait for your theory because I've got to launch the missile a day before your test hypothesis comes true. And we can't do it again because it's too late. So therefore it's got to be done on my schedule. But I guess my point being is that it actually hit 173.3 about 12 hours before they reached the missile firing time and place, or 12 miles or something. It was very close. So we did actually in the episode, in the movie, they didn't call it out and say it, but Zuko was wrong. It didn't happen. It didn't happen when he thought it was going to happen, and it didn't happen. And I got to say,
I would have liked if there had been some kind of a wrap-up scene where...
Oh, yeah. The movie had no wrap-up scene. All right, let's head on back.
It stopped. But I would have liked it if, like, Nelson could have gone up to him and go, right at Zuko, because you effed up. Your numbers were wrong. I was right. Neener.
I'm not even worried about that scene. I'm sure Zuko died with everyone else on the planet.
That's true, too.
Who wasn't in an air-conditioned nuclear submarine under the sea. Because, I did a little bit of research, and for context, for people who have been listening to this podcast or may not have listened to this podcast in the past, Ben and I both live in Phoenix, Arizona,
where it gets hot in the summer.
It really gets hot in the summer, and the hottest day we ever had was 122, and that's brutal. But as they say, it's a dry heat, and that is true.
Yeah.
Okay. So, most of the rest of the world, when it gets hot, we see stuff, oh, look, it's 90 degrees in Chicago and they're dying. It's like, yeah, that's because the humidity. So the prevailing thing is that a wet bulb temperature of 95 degrees, and that is 100% humidity.
No, that's
You're
ugly.
dead. You're dead.
Yeah.
And you will die. You cannot, it is impossible for your body to avoid overheating because you can't, there's no sweat, right? And so as the humidity goes down, that temperature goes up a bit, that you won't die instantaneously. But no, 175? No. Everyone's dead. They're all dead. The whole planet is dead.
Even at 173 degrees.
Yeah.
Even the planet's dead.
I'd say it. I have no idea what, there's different humidities around the planet, but I think even in Phoenix with zero humidity at 175 degrees, I think we'd be dying.
Pretty much.
And so I don't think, and I am using Fahrenheit because this movie uses Fahrenheit, not because I endorse the use of Fahrenheit, which I absolutely do not endorse. But anyway, it's germane to this particular conversation. And yeah, so the numbers were a little bit, where they pulled that out of their rear ends, I don't know. It's like, why?
Because it sounded good, and it was 1961.
And yet, so I did a little calculations, and because I love that. They're somewhere at the Arctic. They're not exactly at the North Pole, but they're at the Arctic ice cap somewhere when they come out, and they're ordered back to New York, and they make it in 48 hours, which, roughly speaking, is about 61 knots. Now, we've already had this discussion with Man from Atlantis back in the Disappearancers or whatever it was, way, way, way back. That is way faster than a submarine could go. Nuke subs can reach, like 45 knots for short periods of time. This would be 60, 61, 62 knots. But it's a science fiction submarine.
Right. I'm going to let that one slide.
I'll let it slide. That's right. I'm going to let it slide because it's not super crazy.
It's not warp speed.
Yeah, it's not super crazy. So then they turn around and they've got to go to the Marianas Trench. Now, assuming that the sub can maintain that same speed and they have to go around the Cape of Horn, 11 days.
Okay.
So again, almost actually as if somebody kind of,
did some math.
Did a little math, maybe not perfect math, but and the obvious thing is, if the Seaview could go under the polar ice cap, why wouldn't they go around that way? It would be shorter. quite a bit shorter. They could have cut that transit time down to 4 or 5 days. I guess it was still so new, right? That the whole under the ice cap thing was like, oh, that's like the ultimate test of a submarine. Maybe we shouldn't try that again. Let's go around the Cape of Horn. But I have to admit, I was thinking about that. It's like, you just proved this sub could go under this ice cap. What? Why are you going? That's the whole point. I mean, that's one of the whole points behind nuclear submarines, is that they could go under the ice cap to get to Russia faster. Yeah. Like, that's kind of why you built them. Anyway, so yeah, it wasn't too crazy off if you could work on the assumption that the Seaview could travel as fast as it did from the North Pole to the United Nations. So given that, it's thing. Also, just FYI, the Van Allen belt was discovered in 1958. And in 1961, they really weren't entirely sure what it was or how it worked. I mean, they knew it was radiation. It was probably charged particles or trapped particles and whatnot. But the science, as you rightly pointed out, is BS. Although he's not. The funny thing is, a lot of people I see online when they're talking about, oh yeah, he's going to burn out the Van Allen belt, or he's going to extinguish the Van Allen. That's not actually what he said. What he actually said was he's going to no. He's going to blow the Van Allen belt away from the Earth. The nuclear explosion is going to divest the Earth of the Van Allen belt, so that it's no longer there. So it's not exactly like, I mean, there is a Van Allen belt, and I guess if you could blow it away from the Earth, then it wouldn't be there. It's the catching on fire part that it's like, there's no oxygen. It can't be on fire. It's saying, but oddly enough, there was a thing called Operation Argus, which was conducted in 1961, I believe. Or it's slightly prior to Project Argus, or prior to 61. That they detonate just before the nuclear test ban treaty. They detonated a nuke in the atmosphere to see if they could basically create an artificial radiation belt around the Earth. The idea was that if they could do that, it would screw up the electronics of incoming Russian ICBMs and defend. And it worked. They were able to create basically a faux radiation belt. It didn't last long enough to accomplish anything, but it did work. It was top secret, and some of the information was released about, this is a scientific thing, but really it was about trying to stop nukes incoming missile nukes. So that also is a thing. There is some discussion in the zeitgeist at this time about nuking the radiation belts. I'm not making an excuse for it. It's just BS science. But in the context, it's kind of like when we talk about, in the 60s, you see a TV show and they're talking about potential ESP, and it's easier to believe that than it is if you watched it now, because it's so thoroughly, absolutely, utterly debunked in every way. But in 1970s, there were some universities that were looking at this stuff. They were gullible fools, but they were looking at this stuff. And so it was, it's fair to have a sort of scientist.
It was kind of chic.
I think it might be real. I don't know. Let's see what else is there. Peter Lorre. I remember this the first time I watched this film, and I had the same reaction the second time I watched the film, except I kind of vaguely remembered my reaction the first time in the film. It's like Peter Lorre wasn't the bad guy.
No. I mean, he was...
Talk about Chekhov's gun.
He was sort of a cranky good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's that whole scene where he's in the sick bay and they're bandaging up his arm. And they're like, well, what happened to you? He's like, Bruce, or the shark, he bit me. And
the shark was named Bessie.
Okay. My mind was like, this is clearly he hurt himself doing some sabotage. Right? Something like that. This is suspicious. Why are you showing us this? Why do we care that his arm is being... It must be
It's not adding anything to the plot.
It's a clue. It's got to be a clue to show us that Peter Lorre is the bad guy, because it's Peter Lorre. Of course, he's the bad guy. It's like, Mr. Moto notwithstanding, it's Peter Lorre. Of course, he's the bad guy. And you just like, and he's not.
Well, if you're going to
Spoilers,
go with
folks.
the art of misdirection, then you also have to include Michael Ansara as Alvarez.
Although he did ultimately turn out to be
He did,
partially a bad guy, but not
the
the
way
bad
we
guy.
thought.
Right.
Because like I said, it had been a long time since I'd seen this, and I had forgotten a lot of details. I actually thought he was the main saboteur.
Well, I think you were definitely meant to think he was the main saboteur because, you get the guy on board, and then he's increasingly a religious lunatic who wants the world to die, and because it's God's will, and then he knows God's will better than anybody, so therefore he must be right. I do appreciate that Nelson did at least, there's that joke where there's the guy there's floods, and there's the guy on the roof, and somebody comes along in a boat.
Oh, yeah.
Like, rescue. And it's like, oh, no, God will take care of me. It's like, okay. And then, another boat comes by. No, God will take care of me. Okay. And then a helicopter comes by. And it's like, nope. The Lord will save me.
Why wouldn't you save me, God? I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. What's wrong with you?
Exactly. And Nelson makes more or less the same argument. It's like, well, if God wanted us to die, then why did he give us the will and the knowledge to
live?
To live, the desire to live. Why?
And it's a compelling argument because it causes Alvarez to pause. It's like, oh, I hadn't studied that.
It's like, and so Nelson is doing something, and by Alvarez doing something, he too is trying to let it not play out the way it would have played out. Right? I mean, if it's all God's will, if it's all, then whatever Nelson does is either going to be successful because God wants it to be, or it's going to be unsuccessful because God wants it to be.
Exactly.
So there's no point in you doing anything because, it's the way it's going to be the way it is, because that's the way it's going to be. And
I kept,
and then you're like
that.
God's agent. You're thinking you are God's agent conducting his will. That is where you get into the religious,
right.
fanatical.
And I kept thinking about that because I've seen that argument, hundreds and hundreds of times from a lot of evangelical religious nuts who said, well, God designed, or God wants these people to die for this reason. And, and I keep thinking,
imagine you have heard that. Yes.
I have heard that so many times in my life. Or God designed this AIDS to kill all these people. And then, and of course, I just want to jump into that argument and said, so why did God give us doctors to find a cure for that? Or and my favorite one, and this is true. Somebody actually, a doctor, and it was a one-time success story that I remember that I think of, where somebody was dying. They had leukemia, and another doctor came along and actually managed to just tamper with an HIV virus and used it to cure the leukemia patient without infecting them with HIV. And so I wanted to go to these same religious nuts and say, well, if AIDS is God's weapon to destroy, to kill all the gays, if that's what AIDS is for, then why give us a doctor who could actually change that and save an innocent life? So yeah, that whole idea of this is God's will argument always chafes against me. And I just, if there's one thing about this movie that really have a love-hate relationship with, it is that. I hate the very trope, but at the same time, I love the idea that it was Michael Ansara who was doing it.
And in a way, I'm gonna allow it. I do think that Irwin Allen may have had some issues with both religious fanatics and psychologists, but we'll come back to that. But the way they portrayed Ansara, which is, here is a man who was raised in the church, and there are places and people where, throughout history and throughout geography, certain children are kind of like, yep, this one's going to be, my child here is going to be the priest.
Right.
Right. It's sort of we've chosen him to be the one that goes into the priesthood kind of thing. And that's what Alvarez says when I was young, but my doubts made me turn my back on that and to that calling. And lying out on the ice, dying, burning, delirious for 2 days, and then being saved in a miraculous save, right? I sent a submarine. And you got picked up by the submarine instead of staying on the ice and going, no, God will get me. He's like, no, the submarine got you. You're in the Arctic. That's an incredible coincidence, miraculous thing. I can totally see somebody who is basically deranged at this point, right? That's stress. That's trauma. That's fear of dying. And can you imagine looking up at the sky the way it looked in that film? I can totally see him going off the deep end. I can get it. I can totally get it that if you were maybe already guilty that you had not followed the path that your parents or your family or had kind of destined for you, I can totally get it. I can absolutely see it. If there's ever a situation where I think somebody is justified in becoming a religious fanatic, I kind of see it. And I think that's a goodish piece of writing, but man, is he a trope.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was fun to see Michael Ansara do that because we're all, especially you and me being the Star Trek fans that we are. I mean, and I've seen him in other movies where he plays this very growly, very antagonistic kind of character. And to hear him being very all soft spoken and almost philosophical, especially early on, was quite it was refreshing. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I also do appreciate when he's proselytizing basically a cult of death approach to the crew.
Exactly.
And Crane comes in and just reads him the riot act about his sniveling philosophies. It's like, okay, you tell him, Crane. Like, I appreciate it. He wasn't remotely diplomatic with that guy. He's just like,
no, Crane shows both Crane and Nelson in their own way, they each show very little diplomatic sense.
No, Nelson clearly is an arrogant guy. He is smart. He knows he's smart.
He's the smartest man in the room.
Yes, he does. And so, like, when he's dealing with the congressman, he is digging at him every chance. He is. It's like, I got my sub. You can't do anything about this. But it's like, you would think he would still be in the mode that I just want to show this guy you got your money's worth, right? Because next time I come to you for my next great project, I want you on my side. But no, that is not how Nelson behaves with the congressman. I mean, it's vaguely cordial, but yeah, I can, and let's face it, there's another one that we could make a good argument that says maybe Irwin Allen had some axe to grind against congressmen. And I think we all do, because they're unqualified human beings making decisions on things that they have no clue.
Oh, I was going to say that Irwin Allen, he was probably gnashing his teeth against not congressmen, but studio heads.
Could be studio heads too.
And he projected that antagonism and just inserted that into the relationship between Nelson and the congressman.
Yeah, it could be. I think we all hate congressmen. So I mean, it's a universal. But yeah, and yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Irwin Allen. He's legendary for a few things. His documentary that he produced, The Sea Around Us, is what really made him a thing. He was the producer, writer, and director of it, although it is based on a book, and the person who wrote an academic book, and the person who wrote the book was not happy the way he presented it, but it did win Best Documentary at the 25th Academy Awards for Films of the Year 1952. Apparently, sea is something that interested him. He'd done a couple other things like the Lost World with David Hedison, but this is really his first big commercial
movie.
Well, the documentary was a big deal because but it's a documentary, and
that's a documentary.
The Lost World is okay, but Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was big. It was quite successful, and so, but this man,
arguably the first disaster movie.
Well, believe it or not, and I haven't done anything about him, but Irwin Allen also did a couple of films before this called, and I kid you, I could double check this, but I believe their titles are Flood and Fire with exclamation points.
Oh my.
I don't know anything about them. I saw them listed in like an IMDb or something. I'm like, well, that does sound a bit like Irwin Allen.
Because Irwin Allen later on, he became
Towering
like the
Inferno.
king of the disaster movies. Towering Inferno probably being
Poseidon.
his most successful. Poseidon
Adventure. Yeah. Big disaster films. But of course, on Fusion Patrol, not that we've only reviewed one thing that Irwin Allen has done past that, and that was The Time Travelers, which was a remake pilot for like another go at Time Tunnel. Time Tunnel was Irwin Allen's favorite show that he did. And it just didn't fly. But he said afterwards, it's like, I always liked that one. And that's why he tried again with The Time Travelers. John and I reviewed that a few years back. But also Lost in Space and Land of the Giants and Time Tunnel. Those are the big shows, TV shows that you think of when you think of Irwin Allen. The Lost World starred David Hedison. Irwin Allen liked him, wanted him to star as Captain Crane in this movie. Hedison turned it down. Didn't really want to be associated with doing another of this sort of sci-fi movie.
And yet.
Well, he came back apparently for two reasons. His good pal, Irwin Allen, when they went to series, Irwin was after him again. Want you for this role. And I guess there were two things. One, I guess he was friends with Roger Moore, hence his job as Felix Leiter in Live and Let Die. And Roger Moore said, do it. And it's like, and also he wanted to work with,
Basehart?
Basehart, there we go. All I could think of was the star of this show. Yeah, Richard Basehart. He apparently wanted to work with Richard Basehart. So he did it. And of course, it's probably his most famous role. And I hope it didn't ruin his life, because it's like, I don't know. I always like David Hedison is one of those actors. You just see him in something and you go, I like that guy. I know nothing about him personally, but you just kind of like, he just comes off as like, I like the guy. So
he's more likable than the Nelson. I mean, than the Lee Crane we get in the movie.
Yeah, the Lee Crane we get in the movie, which is also Lee Crane. This is his last mission. He's done with this job, right? I mean, he's got command of this amazing submarine, which is he had to quit the Navy to join this sub. All the crew have to leave the Navy, even though they're all basically Navy. It's one of those, I get the feeling it's like Taiwan. We send diplomats to Taiwan, but you can't call them diplomats. So what you do is they quit, and then they get hired by an NGO that is basically funded by the U.S. to act as ambassadors and staff. And I think that's what they do here, is that they quit the Navy and then they're hired by a government-funded NGO that is the USOS. And then they're Navy, but they're not Navy. But he's quitting in 2 weeks. They bought a ranch in Colorado, he and his wife to be. And so, totally different from what we see in the series, who of course does not have Barbara Eden, who, is nice eye candy, but really accomplished nothing in this film.
Her big thing was, she danced and she unsuccessfully
trying to stop Lee from arguing with the Admiral.
Yeah, she tried to be the Admiral's champion and all this, and not that it got very far. I think it was merely to just play with the whole romance bit, because it isn't very long into the movie that all of a sudden, here comes the romantic subplot.
But it wasn't even much on that.
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't much on that. I just think they needed to have a couple women in the show, and so for demographic purposes, and they said, well, all right. pretty girl on the poster. We want that. I mean, it's crass and it's cynical, but it's
1961.
It's totally accurate. It's totally accurate. There's one other thing that Irwin Allen is known for. What when you think of Irwin Allen, what is there anything that comes to mind? I have seen documentaries on this man, and absolutely universally, every person who ever worked with Irwin Allen has the same thing to say about him.
I have no idea.
He is the cheapest man on the planet.
Oh, that now that you say that, I am not surprised. And I'm only saying that based on some of the rubbish that, and I say this with love because I love Lost in Space because it is so cheesy. But holy moly, there is the recycling that is done in that is just garish.
When they made this film and then they were done, and you strike the sets down, he's like, no, let's put these in storage. And that's why the sets are very, very much not exactly the same, but pretty darn close to the same. I think they had rejiggered them for 4:3 aspect ratio, but yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same sets, just looking a little bit smaller. So
I'm sure the studio heads must have loved that. It saves on production costs when they were.
But the series is several years away. It's several years away. This was not made as a pilot for a series.
No,
this is
I know,
just
I
him
know.
Being cheap and saving it for his next project. And it
whatever that project going to be. I mean, luckily, it turned out that it was going to be Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea anyway.
There are websites out there that go into all the stuff, like the Seaview sets. You can see them in Lost in Space. You can see them in Time Tunnel. They're all over. The flying sub is reused in the City Beneath the Sea, which is a pilot he did. Another pilot.
And let's not even discuss the monsters that show up in Lost in Space.
Yeah,
that were recycled from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the series.
Yeah, he was demanding and he was cheap, but he could get it done. And there are people who could work with him, and then there were people who could not work with him. And I guess coming back to where we sort of were on this, I guess David Hedison was one of those people that he thought could work with him, because he all right, you were in one of my movies, it worked, let's get you back here. Whatever that happens, whatever the reason happens to be. Let's see. Totally pointless thought. But for whatever reason, when I put this on the other day to watch it, and it opened up with that really proper old school 20th Century Fox fanfare at the beginning, I was like, God, that is such a great opening. I love that intro, and I know it's associated with my original viewings of Star Wars.
Me too.
In my mind, but it's like that was a great tag, whatever they call that, at the beginning of the shows. I know they don't use it quite the same anymore.
It's certainly
it's not 20th century anymore for starters.
No, it's not.
But it's shorter
for us.
Quieter, I think, too.
It is. But for people, you and me and our generation, it's part of the pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how you can associate those with certain films. The old UA logos that you used to see right before a James Bond film. I know it's all MGM Amazon now, and it's been MGM for quite a while. So for, I don't know, all of Pierce Brosnan, I think it's been the lion roaring. But back in the 70s when Roger Moore, it was United Artists. And I remember those would always come out with, and you go, okay, here it goes. Here's the gun barrel. We're ready. So, and if to the point where if I see one of those United Artists ones on any other film, I immediately think that the next thing will be the gun barrel. It's just in there.
And it's the same thing with me whenever I hear the 20th Century logo. I mean, as soon as the fanfare finishes, I expect to see in blue font a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah. And then boom, the cue. I think if I recall correctly, I had the first record album LP I ever owned, I think, was The Story of Star Wars, and I think it opened with the 20th Century Fox fanfare. Yes, it does. So every time I listened to that, it just reinforced it. Anyway,
No, I agree completely. It's like I expect to hear that married with the bum ba da da, right from
Yep.
the beginning of Star Wars. I mean, it's like in my head, those two are now forever linked.
Linked. They are permanently linked. Which brings me to a completely different thing, which is totally the same. One of my all-time favorite TV theme songs is Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, but
That's a
it is
good
not.
theme.
But it is not this theme.
No. No, it's not.
When that music starts, and again, going back to like the first time I saw it, my disappointment kept building. That was another one. It's like, I'm ready for it. Da-da-da. No, what is this singing guy? He's terrible. He'll never make a career in music. Ick.
So let's talk about that. This movie, I mean, right from the very opening credits, I had to write, when I was writing my notes last night, this is one of the first things that just really stuck out. The opening music, it's lovely. It's really lovely. It's highly deceiving. If you don't know anything about this movie, all of a sudden you start hearing Frankie Avalon starting to sing, and you're seeing water right there on the screen.
Sounds
I
like
mean,
a
you think, oh, I'm going to be
Love
watching
Boat.
you're thinking to be watching some really relaxing, possibly romantic movie that takes place on the sea. You're not going to be seeing what is going to end up being a science fiction thriller, a modest one, but still a sci-fi thriller.
Yep.
And that lovely music is constantly coming back.
Yep. And the funny thing is that one of the composers on the soundtrack for this film is Paul Sawtelle. Paul Sawtelle is the guy who did the theme music for the TV series, A Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Which is a better theme.
Well, it's not only is it a better theme, and I have another plug, guys. La La Land Records. If you're into soundtracks, La La Land Records has the complete soundtrack for Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the series. And, there's some good episodes, there's some bad episodes. It's not all done by Paul Sawtelle, but, like any of those shows, I couldn't even detect any music in this episode.
I did. I was listening for it. It's there.
I saw Paul Sawtelle's name, and I thought, I seem to recall that the music, well, no, by this point, you can see him on the screen. The music's wrong. And I go, that's the same guy. So maybe the rest of the music sounds like no, I just really didn't notice it. It was so, even though I was like, I'm waiting to hear it, nope, didn't catch it. I know you're right. There are a couple points where you hear a little bit of music, but
it's more than a couple. It comes back a lot.
I suspect it's pervasive, but it's not. It doesn't rise up out of it, unless, to me anyway.
Well, for me, it did, but for all the wrong reasons, because it felt very out of place to what we just came through. It's like, and it was always. Okay, so as you pointed out, you were comparing this movie to to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This movie does have a series of underwater vignettes that's tied together with this plot about trying to save the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, but every time they get out of that immediate crisis, and now we're back to smooth sailing, to get to your next, before you arrive at your next plot complication, you're back to that lovely music again.
Yeah,
it really grated on me, because it felt. One of the beautiful things about music is I can do a really great job of creating emotion and creating tension. Even when you're not aware of it, it can do a great job at raising the stakes dramatically. And it didn't do that. Not in this movie. It gave you more of a sense of pause.
Yeah.
Every single time, where you just kind of say, we're out of that danger now, kind of thing, instead of keeping you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah. I definitely think they could rescore this and do it.
And the neat thing about the score for the series is that it underlines the tension,
the adventure,
you're going to be experiencing when you watch this series, because it's still a science fiction thriller, albeit a little corny at times. It's still a sci-fi thriller under the water. So you're going to be in for some danger at some point.
Yeah, thinking about remastering, it's funny. Like when they redid the special effects in Star Trek, I think, yeah, those are. I like them. I'm a fan of the redone special effects. I think it
Me
works
too.
very well. I don't think it would work well for Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea because
No,
first off, they're awesome.
they're pretty
The
good.
effects are awesome.
Yeah.
And that shot where the sub is first when the ice is coming down, which makes no sense whatsoever, but okay.
No.
It's like, why would it be
Ice would
falling?
be floating.
It would be floating, but okay. It's falling off big cliffs. It's dropping. It would go down to maybe 100 feet, maybe at
And
most,
then
but
it would, yeah. And then it go right back up.
But when they're coming up and you don't know what's happening, and as they reach, the water is lit from the burning sky. It is such a nice shot.
It's a good look. It's a great look.
It is like, it's telling you something's wrong, and yet at the same time, maybe you don't know. Maybe you think it's just sunset, and they're going to pop out, and there's going to be a beautiful big sun just setting behind the waves. But then they pop up in the sky. So the sky effects are
the
nice.
Sky effects are really great, and I would say
particularly over New York.
Oh yeah, but the thing that I noticed is when after they're hit with all this ice that's not supposed, chunks of iceberg that are not supposed to be sinking and hitting them. So so already plot complication has just started. We don't know the full extent of it yet, and and when you see that red sky, it's so well timed in terms of the story that you automatically think, okay, there's some serious going on right now.
Yeah. So it's
the effects are really good, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think that also that was one of the strongest moments. There are some really good pacing, moments where the pacing is just perfect, where everything is just very nicely timed to heighten whatever problem that they're dealing with at that moment.
I will say that when I was writing my summary for this episode, my first draft is, I don't know, 2-3 times longer than what I used in the recap, because there is just so much going on in this film.
Yeah, my notes are pretty long too.
It's like it was on and on, and I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna go beat by beat. And then, then Crane is like, once again, convinced that Nelson is going a little wacko. And, so I worked real hard to get that down to without missing too much, but I was not entirely happy with what I had to do because there was so much going on, and it doesn't really drag. This film doesn't drag.
No.
It doesn't. It
moves at a pretty good clip.
Well, I got to get to that Marianas Trench. By the way, those GPS coordinates, the longitude, latitude, yes, that's where it is. Somebody looked on a map. Somebody looked on a map. But then again, Irwin Allen apparently did a thing about underwater, so he probably actually knows what longitude and latitude are. So, as opposed to the people from Atlantis. Same thing. Okay. Something came up while you were mentioning that. This is off topic, but it's one of those 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea parallels, if I recall correctly. So our heroes of 20,000 Under the Leagues, Ned Land and Professor Aramat, something like that, if I'm not mistaken, are prisoners aboard the Seaview. And they're trapped anyway. Aboard, but the Nautilus.
The Nautilus.
And at one point, they are out helping with something. I don't remember what it was, mining or cutting up kelp or recovering lost treasure. It was one of those sequences, and big squid attacks, shark attacks. Nemo is nearly killed, and I forget which one of our guys saved his life. So there is that scene. Ned. I think it was Ned in the harpoon man, but yeah. So, although I may be confusing that with a Disney film, but the point is, the exact same thing happens in this. Alvarez saves Crane, and he has to have that moment. Well, thank you for saving this. Like, well, the Lord guided my hand, and whatnot. But it's just another one of those like plot beats that they hit from the maybe we can trust Alvarez. Maybe they're coming to thing. And I will say, what the heck's up with his dog?
Yeah.
What happened to his dog? Why didn't the dog have a bigger part in this film? That dog was cute.
I'm surprised the dog lived.
So am I. A lot of fur. But yeah. Like I was kind of
yeah, the dog.
He didn't get fed to the shark, I hope.
No, what was the whole point of the dog? To make him look more sympathetic?
Maybe.
I mean, that didn't help Blofeld with his cat.
It would have been hilariously funny if it turned out that dog's name was Jim.
Don't.
Well, you know why, right? When Alvarez was on the bed and he was delirious, he was trying to find Jim.
Oh,
and that's what Crane was like. There's more survivors. We got to go out.
He mentioned several names. Alvarez mentioned Jim was one of them.
Jim was one of them, but I think the other was like a last name. So it could have been, well, that's true.
I kind of got the feeling it was more than one person.
Yeah, it could be, but still.
But they never really went much further than that.
No, those guys are dead. I mean, they're all dead. Everybody's dead.
They're all dead, Dave. Everybody's dead. Everybody's dead, Dave.
Now, there is one major screw up in this film that I remember from the first time I watched it, and I remember it this time. So, Dr. Hiller, who we now know is the baddie, and that she is trying to sow discord and make Crane relieve Nelson and stop this insane plan.
I think she just simply wants off the sub.
Well, no, I think then going in and getting yourself killed with the radiation is not really the way. I think she genuinely believes, like Zukov, that this is a crazy idea and that it must be stopped. I do actually believe that that's her conclusion, and that maybe seen through the light of a psychiatrist and seeing the fact that Nelson is a little, because a lot of the things that she says are signs of cracking up, Nelson does do, right? He does not search for people. He does dive and let the military police get nearly killed. He's definitely a driven man, and I can see how Hiller might have doubts about him. So thinking that maybe his plan's a bad idea, I can totally see that. But she typed the threatening note on his thing. Then they, think, well, I think maybe he typed it himself. And then his cabin catches on fire, and Nelson says, somebody's trying to kill me. It's like, no, we found a cigar on the floor. And again, Hiller is, is like, yeah, he's making an excuse. And then Nelson's like, no, I ran out of cigars last night and didn't have any. So no, somebody planted that to make it look like it. It's like, but nobody believes him.
Mm-hmm.
What about the gas canister?
Yeah, that kind of got lost.
It got lost, but they had to surface and they had to vent the sub because it was that bad. It's not like you can just go, well, there wasn't really a gas canister. That was just our imagination. No, there was a gas canister. Nelson was unconscious because he'd been gassed.
And they completely ignored it. I mean, yeah,
so
here they are. They're putting
to himself, I'm going to gas myself, and then I'm going to toss a cigar out there so I'll catch on fire. It's like, come on. That's over the line.
I think they were trying to imply something, because earlier, one of the other crew members of the Seaview, he basically crashed himself into a medicine cabinet while he was in the sick bay, and then OD'd. So I think they were maybe trying to insinuate that Crane maybe just took some medicine. Nelson. Excuse me, Nelson. He took some medication just to make himself pass out.
Well, the gas, yeah,
or something. Because, I'm saying this before the gas. I'm saying this.
Burned.
Well, I'm saying this before the gas, because when the crew go into Nelson's quarters and they're trying to rouse him.
Yep.
As they're also putting out the fire, he's not coming to.
Right. So his bed is on fire and he's just like sleeping.
He's out of it.
But he's gassed. Yeah.
So my first thought was, And I'm not saying that I believed it, but my first thought was he got drugged and they're going to think that he did it himself before setting his cabin on fire. That's what they're going to think. And then it's later, Lucius says, no, it's gas, as he points to the vent.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's not till after that point that Hiller tells Crane, basically, I think Nelson might have been trying to kill himself. Like, or, she says Nelson's paranoid. It's like an accident he's turned it into a murder attempt, basically, which
makes no sense
was
at all.
not an accident.
No.
It's not how he would have done it.
No. And well, the other thing that really kind of bugs me is that Hiller's analysis of that situation is completely incongruous with everything that Nelson is trying to do. Okay, so let's assume for a second, just for a second, that she's right about Nelson being crazy and his plant will detonate, the Van Allen belt and destroy all life on Earth. Let's assume that she's right and that he's clinically insane in this mad attempt to do that. If that is so, then this other diagnosis about him wanting to kill himself and set his cabin on fire does not fit.
Do remember, though, that this is after he killed the guys in the mini sub.
Oh, yeah.
He did do that. But I think that's also an interesting scene because Nelson feels bad. I mean, he
does feel bad.
He ordered the ship to go forward without radar or sonar, and they stray into a minefield, which, right off the bat, come on. But where are there minefields on the west coast of South America? But okay, neither here nor there. They stray into a minefield. He has to send out the mini sub. Young man who he knows from childhood is a volunteer, got basically roped into volunteering by one of the other guys who also blew up, and then they die. He feels bad about it, and it's like, it was my decision to proceed. I ultimately got him dead. Fine. He's right. He did. Then we find out that the engineer who killed himself left a suicide note. The suicide note says, I damaged the generator. And so then Nelson says to Crane, oh, well, I wasn't to blame. Not my fault after all. It's like, yeah, no, actually it is because you still ordered the sub to move on when it didn't have power. So yes, it is still your fault.
Yeah.
But it is weird. Nelson just like, yep, not my fault. Okay, off we go.
The way he washed his hands of that was really cringy. I did not like that at all.
But it fits with his fanatical devotion to get the job done, not to go kill himself.
No, that's true. It does fit in with Hitler's first diagnosis.
Yep.
Of what Nelson is like and what he's going through. So did they keep that in just so that now we're questioning things? Was that done just to mess with the audience's head?
I don't know. But it is weird.
But it's a weird scene.
It is a weird scene. So now, one thing that people who might be having watched Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the TV series, is that there is only one cast member from this movie that is in the series.
Oh, that'd be Sparks.
Nope, that's not the same guy.
Not the same guy?
I'm pretty sure not. I think in the series,
he doesn't
have, there is a Sparks, but I don't think he's talking like this, Admiral. It's like, I don't think it's the same actor.
I thought it was.
And Sparks doesn't talk very often in the other. But anyway, it's Kowalski, the guy who shattered the milk in his hand, the guy who led the mutiny. Except that Crane calls him Kowski. But he's Kowalski in the series, but it is definitely the same guy. I'm like, no. When he was leading the rebels, no, Kowalski, no. You can't be the guy who's going to abandon the ship. You're one of the good ones. You're one of the most loyal, there's the crew members who are so loyal to the Admiral and to the captain that no matter how crazy brain control they are, they're the ones that are going to be with him. That's Kowalski. they're going to be like, no, I got to follow the captain's orders. It doesn't matter that he ordered me to blow up the sub. It's the only way. If he says it's the only way, that's Kowalski. So the fact that he's the guy leading the mutiny is hilarious and doesn't even make it on the end. Okay, we're going to pick on Zuko for a second. I think this is 1960s, but what was Zuko?
Sounded like a Russian scientist.
Yeah, they said he was French.
Oh, French?
Yes, I know the accent was. They said he was French, and yep, it would be the World War II surrender monkeys, the French. I mean, that's definitely 1961 prejudices playing out there. Of course, it's the French who would surrender and just go, yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. We're okay. It's like, it's a different group of people now, and they're in a different country, but that's another story. And then the last thing, and this is quite famous. And as best I can tell, may have been pioneered here. It's kind of hard to say because this is not the sort of thing that research is very good at. Have you ever heard the phrase? And I think you should, because, well, let's ask this question then. Star Trek. What do they do when they're hit by a phaser or a torpedo or they're grabbed by a giant hand in space?
Well, got called red alert.
They shake the camera from side to side.
Okay.
And the actors
they jump from one side to the other. Yeah.
From side. So that is known in Hollywood and in fan circles as the Seaview rock and roll.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that.
No kidding. And apparently, like I said, this is certainly the Seaview. This is one of the first instances of using that, because apparently a lot of times when they wanted to do stuff like that in previous films, they would actually have like set hands shaking sets and stuff. But Allen, being cheap, just like, okay, we're just going to shake the camera back and forth. And apparently there was a guy with a skillet who would bang the pan every time they wanted the actors to change directions. And the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the series, is known for its extremely vigorous use of the Seaview rock and roll. Which was then...
I'm glad you brought that, because there was one scene in this that just had me laughing so hard. Okay, so the Seaview is being pursued by another sub.
Yeah.
And they're going way down and they're going deeper and deeper into the trench. And there are a number of torpedoes that have been fired at them, but there are two that hit the rock. They hit the cliff rocks.
Yep.
Or, the rocks as the Seaview is passing by. And both times that happens, we do a cut into what I'm guessing is supposed to be the ship's mess.
And
they're all being shaken about. Forget the fact that it's battle stations and everybody should be at their station.
Or because confined to quarters as per
Nelson's orders. But here they are. They're inside the ship's mess. But the one that killed me, it's the second blast that shakes up the sub. If you watch really carefully, there's a guy, as they're all being shoved around, and tables are shaking and food and drink are flying. There's one guy who's sort of in the background who's doing his damnedest to make sure his cigarette does not fall out of his mouth.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of smoking on this submarine, which apparently was apparently okay up until about 2020. So, yeah. I don't know about cigars.
It was just something so funny
around, but yeah.
I know, but there's something really funny about seeing this guy. He's being shaken around all over the place, and he's got this death grip with his mouth on this cigarette to make sure that it doesn't fall out. I could not stop staring at that bit. It's like, I got to look at that again because it's just so funny.
There's also an interesting thing about that scene, which I think it's an interesting way to accomplish something. The submarine comes at the Seaview. Just as Crane is relieving Nelson of command. Well, and Nelson isn't in command, but he's relieving him of duty. And because he's, You've been disregarding people's lives. You didn't go for survivors. You could have killed those guards.
You're being irresponsible.
You're being irresponsible with the lives of other people. And I'm going to relieve you of command or relieve you of duty. And Submarine attacks, launches, and they know there's submarines hunting for them, launches torpedoes. And Crane's first reaction is, rig torpedoes, return fire. And Nelson's like, you can't shoot them. They're innocent. And I think that scene is to absolutely confirm in our minds, no, Nelson's not crazy.
He's not being irresponsible with lives. He's trying to be practical.
He's like, we're trying to save the world. I wasn't going to kill those guys on the dock because they can swim.
Even though one of them was clearly drowning if you look at it carefully.
Yeah, somebody helped him up. Yeah. And then when they found Alvarez on the ice, he'd been there for days and he'd been, burning. And it was like, we got to go look for survivors. It's like, they're dead. He's making a practical call. We're calling the search. It's been too long. It's hard.
And we have a mission.
It's harsh, but, we've been given top priority orders to get. So, he's demonstrating here that no, he's not completely callously disregarding life. Let's dive the Seaview instead to a depth that's too deep for that submarine because, hey, I built this thing. It's great. And which is fine. But then the submarine follows them and blows up and they all die anyway. So it didn't save anybody's life.
No, but I think they're saying
it's not his fault now.
I think Nelson was hoping that the other sub would back off.
Yeah. And they get down to 3,200 feet before the other sub collapses, which is quite deep. I don't know what the depths are submarines are. I should have looked that one up, but I did mark down that it was at 3,200 feet when the other sub collapsed underneath. And that is a thing. The Seaview is in the series is that it's got a heck of a depth compared to some other submarines. But yeah, you mentioned this. I don't think I actually finished my thought on it because I think we got diverged onto a tangent. And if not, well, apologizes for repeating this. The film just ends. They blow out the thing and they're like, okay, let's head for home. They're like, what home?
You don't have a home.
You guys don't have a home. You don't. The forests are burnt. The grain belt is burnt. The cities are dead. The human race has been extinguished. I mean, what does this world look like when he gets back to port? And just going to put one more thing out there. When the crew mutiny and they're like, we all want to go home and see our families. Where are your families? Oh, mine's in California. Mine's in New York. Mine's in Florida. It's like,
how are you going to get there?
Do you think the sub's going to take you to all of your homes? It's like, come on. It's like, get real. Get real. This but it's that whole, we want to get home. It's like, I understand, but the practicality of that seems pretty.
It's really ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's something else. I want to go back to this bit when they were in the Marianas Trench and Crane goes out and does the launch of the nuclear missile or nuclear bomb, whatever, to the Van Allen belt. Several things. Well, that's one heck of a guidance system if it was able to make it successfully to its target from that kind of depth.
Well, no, is it a guidance system or was it some sort of a launch? I don't know. It didn't make much sense.
Well, either way, I mean, I was doing my own research, and subs, even nuclear subs today, if they're going to be doing a launch, they do it really close to the surface of the water.
Yeah.
And the Seaview didn't.
Well, if he's 3,200 feet down too, he didn't go swimming out there either.
No, that's the other thing. And so now, which brings me to my next point. I mean, not in that scuba gear, clearly. No. And that brings me to my next point. And that is when the Seaview finally surfaces, assuming that's told in real time, I hope it's not. Because if it is, then poor Crane, bends. He's going to have the worst case of the bends.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm guessing that they had to continue maneuvering to a higher altitude. That, in other words, here's my not. You're absolutely right. I thought of the same thing. The only thing that Alvarez is stopping them from doing is launching the missile. It did not stop them from continuing to be on launch stations. So the sub may have, after they got rid of the other sub, they may have started heading back towards the surface. We just don't see
maybe. We just didn't see
we're
it.
still, Nelson, we got to get to that spot. We got to get to that spot. They get ready to fire the missile. They're preparing to fire the missile as if they know they're in the right place at the right time on the right location. And then Alvarez is like, nope, Admiral, I'm going to stop you. Here's my grenade. And so it's not explicit, but considering that Crane has to go out in regular scuba gear, I think we're going to have to say we didn't see that last few minutes of them rising back up to the surface. Interesting thing, we talked about on Man from Atlantis, but we can talk about it here. Radio doesn't work underwater. And in this movie, they have the only way to communicate with the sub is with lights and each other. But in the TV series, man, they've got underwater radio on all their scuba gear. They actually can talk while they've got the respirator in their mouths.
That's fascinating. I've always wondered about that.
Yep. It's the thing they added for the series. And I can see why. I mean, it's not much fun if they have to write notes and stuff, but it is scientifically not very, very valid. But again, not this movie. This movie dealt with the issue because they weren't actually scuba diving that much. I don't know that I have anything else.
No, I don't think that I've got really anything else either, except that the one thing that just made me laugh hysterically was the squid effect. The squid. I mean, it looked so fake. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's, I have to say this.
CGI squid. We could do that.
Yeah, I know. No, but the squid effect was about as frozen as Barbara Bain's face.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Sorry.
Deep cut.
Oh, my word. I am so Now, I meant to say that with my Barbara Bain, I love you. I really do. I'm so sorry. Her face is pulled so tight. I swear, even though the giant octopus with its suction cups couldn't change the facial expression.
Yeah, the giant octopus was a bit. The giant octopus was obviously an octopus, whereas the giant squid was obviously
the squid
plastic.
Was that was pathetic.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, just as a reassurance to the audience, it is not and has never been on the Fusion Patrol list to do the series Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. It's not planned, not something I think makes sense. Too long, So just FYI, this is just a one-off for movie night, the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea film.
Well, we're also, if we're doing what's that TV series you used to watch was Journey to Beyond or whatever.
Journey to Beyond.
I don't know. The series that you're drawing all that you saw as a kid that you watched every Saturday or Sunday, and it would pull all these movies and you would watch them.
Well, that doesn't even ring any bells.
You mentioned it at the top of the show.
Oh, World Beyond Theater.
World Beyond Theater. That's it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, all movies. Yeah. All movies. But
that's what we're doing. We're looking at things that were on World Beyond Theater.
Yeah, I just didn't want people to think that they Logan's Run was on World Beyond Theater. But then we went on to the series, and I just thought people might be thinking, oh, they're prepping to do. Nope, we are not prepping to do Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Thank you.
No, not happening.
I wish to maintain my sanity, what little left I have of it.
Well, it's obviously it lasted 4 years. It's infinitely better than Man from Atlantis, but it's
oh my God. Well, that's hardly a stretch.
That's hardly a stretch, but it's probably 25, 27 episodes a season. It's doing Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea until the year 2050. It's no. All right. Ben, thank you for joining me.
Oh, what a joy.
And listeners, I do hope you'll join us all again next time on Fusion Patrol.
Cheers.
Ahoy there. Cheers. Yes.
Yeah.
This has been Fusion Patrol. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, we hope you'll consider supporting us at buymeacoffee.com/fusionpatrol or patreon.com/fusionpatrol. For our Patreon subscribers, we're currently running a special series on Babylon 5. Come join the conversation and find other content at fusionpatrol.com. You can contact us on social media where our Fediverse address is @podcast@fusionpatrol.com or by email at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. Fight the Future by Amberwolf is our theme music. You can find more from Amberwolf at bandcamp.com. This has been a Lone Locust production.